Hello everyone and welcome back to the And More Bus Videos YouTube channel. I'm on More Bus Videos, otherwise known as And More Central, depending on what day of the week and what video you're watching. And welcome to Norwood Green Bus Depot on the 68 service. But I was hoping by this point the destination would have loaded up. And it doesn't seem to have wanted to as of yet. But in this video we are going to be driving the 68 service from here at Norwood Bus Garage all the way through to Aldwych. It should take us, by the looks of it, just over 40 minutes. We'll see how long it does take. I am hoping that the blind does load up soon. We are not doing the free service, so I am hoping that the blind does want to play ball soon. We are going to have to leave late if it doesn't want to work. So yeah, all being well, it'll work. We're driving the lovely London City Bus C400 because I absolutely love this vehicle, so I thought why not. And we're driving E185 SN61BHY. So that's going to be our go-ahead London E400 into the capital. So we may as well make a move round. I mean, it's
Norwood Bus Garage.
I mean, at least the enhancements are working. It's all decided to work now. Just out of nowhere, it decided to work. So there we go. So let's get people on. So either way, even if a load of new buses for London or either settings like that dreadful thing behind showed up, I was always going to take a C400 on this run. So I was quite glad that when I sort of spawned in, all the C400s rocked up. It was pretty cool. So it's been a while since I've driven in Adam London, so this is going to be a hopefully nice and fun experience rather than incredibly scary, but we shall see. I've got an absolutely perfect bus for it, the Dennis Trident 2 E400, as I say, otherwise known as the City Bus 400. This is my go-to vehicle for driving in London, purely because it sounds amazing. It's very, very rapid off the mark, and it's very manoeuvrable as well. Now, I've actually driven a couple of these in real life, and I've got to say that they are one of my favourite types of buses to drive. I've not driven that many vehicles, I must say, but they are one of my top vehicle types. Purely because the ones I've driven have absolutely amazing acceleration, and once you do get used to the brakes, they are lovely, lovely motors. You do have to get used to the brakes, though, and they're not the easiest things to get used to. But once you do, they're absolutely phenomenal motors.
(68) to Aldwych, Norwood Road, Robson Road.
So yeah, I do like driving these longer London services from time to time. I don't feel they get the appreciation that they deserve anymore. No, they're all pretty content. They just like to stand by the door. That does sometimes throw me off a little bit.
68 to Aldwych.
But yeah, the lovely motors of these Trident 2s. The older ones you get, the better they are as well. Really, really nice. When they're well looked after, they are nice.
Hey lad, the wheels on the bus are supposed to go round and round, not fly off.
Be right, duck. Be right. And this is why in London, especially in this game, and this map, I absolutely floor it about, because you can just be sat at these lights for ages. And just like in realistic fashion, the roadworks aren't always bus friendly as well. So no, that on some routes there are some really narrow ones that are just not the nicest in the world. How are we doing for time? We're only a minute late, so we're doing okay. Remember when I first started driving in this map, I'd end up about 10 or 15 minutes late. No, I don't do half as bad now, but
Hill Station.
you would just end up so late. There we go, one with the old delivery, very nice. I believe the mod has been released now, but as I always said that the London Trident 2 sounds should be in the regional, I do think somebody has made that happen. I just haven't had chance to drive the C400R in a while. So the problem is because the dimensions on this bus, when you put it alongside the other double-deckers in OMSI, the dimensions are ever so slightly out. So for the purposes of this map, when you're just passing C400s, or you're passing either setters of the same size, or you're passing new route masters that are all on the same dimensions, it fits in. But when you're driving this on a totally different map, the dimensions, it just looks a little bit out, especially the regional one, just looks a little bit out of place. Like the dimensions are just slightly smaller on it. So I don't tend to pick it anymore to drive. I tend to go with the MMC a little bit more now. Because as I say, the dimensions on this are just slightly out, and for me personally, it just ruins it slightly, unfortunately. So everybody's opinion's different, but for me, if you put this against the MMC, the dimensions on this are just a lot smaller.
'68 to Aldwych.
Off we go. I do love the acceleration on this. So the acceleration and just how fast it gets up to its max speed of 45 is nice. Just the only issue in this game is you can't particularly use these buses elsewhere because of how low the limiter is on them. I think having driven the Evo set, I remember the dreadful run I did with it on the Great Rundorf 2 on the airport dual carriageway run. Oh, it was just absolutely dreadful. Really was dreadful. So it reminds me, another bus I do need to drive is I need to drive the B5 Gemini 3s again. I haven't driven them in a while, the London spec ones for Master Switch Studios. I need to give them a go because they're usually quite nice. They're really, really nice buses. And I remember when it first came out, I drove it on that N2 service and it was just absolute rocket bus. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like this, but the acceleration on those just put this to shame. It really, really did. I mean, I don't think I've been on any of the Gemini 3 ones in London. I've been on the Gemini 2s that do the 29 purely because those will be coming off soon. So I do need to do another trip down and go more of them, to be fair. It says that it's just spent a month down south and didn't actually go to London. I was only, I think, 45 minutes away from central London by train, and I just never went. Just didn't get the chance.
to Aldwych.
Oh, and another C200 little single decker. Is that the 322? Yes. Need to do a run to Crystal Peaks again. It's been a while since I've driven there in this game. I mean, it's been a while since I've just driven the map generally, to be fair. It's such a big map, yet because all the other stuff's been released in more recent times, people have kind of just forgotten about it.
to Aldwych. Brockwell Park. to please move down inside the bus. Hernhill Station. Please move down inside the bus.
Seats are available on the upper deck.
Please move down inside the bus.
Seats are available on the upper deck. Please move up.
Because everybody's just stood at the front with me. Everyone stood at the front with me. Seemingly one since having Natter when I've got a pretty relatively quiet upper deck, to be fair.
Bollingbourne Road.
Oh, that sounded good with its long gear. So there was a debate recently that I read on, didn't contribute but read on, about the B network. As you'll all know from the videos hopefully on the Ammo Central channel, if you haven't already, do go and check them out. There's going to be more videos coming up very soon. The B network was launched, the first franchising outside of London, was launched in Bolton and Wigan last month, month before, depending on when I release this video. There's a lot of controversy when it first started, driver shortages, some drivers weren't actually route taught or given a duty on the first few days, or they just sat around while buses didn't run, and there was issues with vehicles, bits and bobs like that. And we've got past that teething problem. Now the issue that they've got now is a lot of the Manchester timetables are quite tight and quite optimistic, and there's quite a few drivers who know the routes really well, and there's also quite a few drivers who don't, and as a result buses are starting to bunch. Now in the London system, when buses bunch, they'll be regulated, so they'll be on a system, they'll regulate them, or if a bus ends up catastrophically late, they'll radio through and then they'll sort of go from there. So the idea is with a system like that, is somebody can be monitoring the routes, they can see the significant delays and see where buses are bunched together. So if they see that there's buses are 15 minutes apart but they're all running 20 minutes late, but they're nowhere near each other, then they're likely to not curtail a route. You're not going to shove people off a bus if everything's running roughly the same and they're going to have to wait ages for a bus behind. However, if you've got a load of buses together and let's say one of them is on time, or one of them's 10 minutes late and one of them's 25 minutes late, for example,
68.
then what you'll likely do in that situation in the London system is you'd get a radio through, you'd be asked to curtail your bus, so you curtail it at a turnaround point at a sensible location, and it was all in the blinds, all set up, there was somewhere to turn around, all of that lot. And you curtail there, you'd offload your people. If required, you give them a forward travel ticket, although in most scenarios, it probably wouldn't affect them really anyway. And they then wait for the service behind. That would only be a couple of minutes, and that would continue the journey. And in order to regulate the service, the bus that has just turned around short would then probably wait a little bit of time and resume its normal running service outbound again, to regulate the service to ensure it's a frequent route. But on the Manchester system, they don't appear to be doing that. They seem to be having quite a lot of issues with the 163 at the moment, where they're running in clumps of 3 and 4. And the way that they tend to solve the 163 is everything will spin at Middleton. Instead of having potentially northern shorts or shorts just outside of Manchester, everything is terminating at Middleton. That is not particularly the most useful, especially saying that quite a lot of the delays can incur both sides, and it means that there's a lot of mileage. They also had an issue where the 582s are doing a similar thing. There's no curtailment in Atherton on them, and where you could potentially have them as well, or just outside of Bolton. And the 10s, there was a recent photo of 3 10 buses together. Never happened during the Arriva times, but it seems to be happening now. Again, for the reasons that I explained, every driver drives differently. If you've got a driver on there that's been doing the route for a decade, they're going to be a lot quicker than a driver that's just been driving it a week. So that's... And it's also different vehicle types as well can have an influence. So that's where they're running together, but with the 10s, for example, you could curtail them and regulate them as well. So it is a bit of an issue. I would argue that it's kind of the whole point that the B network was introduced, was to provide that level of regulation, and they've kind of not done it. It bugs me a little bit, to be fair. because, as I say, it was seemingly the whole point that sort of regulation was introduced in order to regulate the services rather than change it to a different operator, make the fares different, paint the buses different, and run an incredibly delayed service where, yeah, you might improve the frequency, but the buses still show up at the same time. It's just 3 of them instead of 1. So it's an interesting one. I imagine it's stuff that they'll develop over time. They will develop over time, but it's just, as somebody that
68
researches it is
to
just a shame
Aldwych.
that it's not something that was adopted from day one, where we should have really seen from day one quite a lot, sensible, but quite a lot of curtailments. We should have seen on the first week. There should have been a lot of curtailments to the services, as everybody got used to it, in order to regulate it. But everything as a result of that, yes, there'd have been a lot of short workers, but as a result of that, the punctuality should have been a lot better than it was. That going forward is hopefully something they'll adopt, because in the London system it works really well, and again it's the whole idea of regulating your buses, bringing them under your control in order to regulate them to make sure that they're there for the customers
68
that need them.
to Aldwych.
So it'd be nice to see, and obviously have all the short workings. I'd argue that, to be fair, most operators need short working blinds. Most operators should really have them. It disappoints me a bit when they don't, purely because in the nicest way, even if an accident happens, they should have them. Not saying at peak times. If you're running an every 10-minute service, it's really sensible to just have short working blinds, just so that if you're passing an old turning circle loop, that's not even my stop. It's any of our stop. But no, if you're passing an old terminus loop or a shopping centre, something like that, where there is a sensible turnaround point that you can utilise it if you need it. And yes, it's not the most ideal thing, and it's not the thing you'll want to aspire to have to utilise, but it comes in handy to just have the opportunity just in case.
68 to Aldwych.
So it's like I've used it in the game before, where you sometimes find yourself.
Drivers are changed.
I'm not changing. I'm staying on me. So we go through the Norwood Green Garage. That's where we start, but there's also a potential that drivers change at Camberwell. Interesting.
'68 to Aldwych.
And another garage there, the Bellingall one. But I do think that's the one thing that they need on the B network, is the introduction of short working destination blinds and the opportunity to regulate. So the people in the control room for each service have a list of what blind sets are on the vehicles and what turnaround points are suitable, so they can then radio through to the driver and tell them at what point that they'll be turning around, at what area they'll turn around. Obviously everything needs to be checked just in case and stuff like that, so buses don't get lobbed under low bridges or into trees and things like that. But on the whole, that would work, where the control room would have a list of the short working blinds that correlates with actual safety signed off short working terminus points, that when you put 2 and 2 together, you create yourself a situation where there's a list of short working destination points that can be used, that are all safe to use, and the drivers are aware of.
68 to Aldwych.
But stuff like that used to be quite standard procedure back in the day. Things like that with short workings. I mean, round West Yorkshire especially, it's never really been a thing that took off with short workings. I mean, there's always just been the impression that dead mileage was preferred, so instead of operating a vehicle to a driver changeover point mid-route, if they knew full well that there wasn't going to be a driver to take over, they just wouldn't run the bus on that entire trip. That I always thought was a little bit of a waste, when you could just run it to that point anyway, take everybody off and the vehicle can just go into the depot instead of the driver arriving. So it's stuff like that that I never quite understood. On the other hand, South Yorkshire, first South Yorkshire, and Stagecoach, in fact, although not as regular for Stagecoach, first South Yorkshire use short workings a lot in order to reduce dead mileage. That I think is an incredibly sensible thing to do. You'll see quite on regular occasions the 120 service. With first, you'll have it sometimes where if there is major traffic issues, you'll quite regularly see Ranmore shorts on the outbounds when they're supposed to go full to forward. You'll see Ranmore shorts, and on occasion as well, you'll also see Hallamshire Hospital shorts during the day. Now, I don't believe there is anything officially from first on the 120s that terminate at Hallamshire Hospital, but again, it's a destination blind that they have. And in the past, I have seen them use where a service has been running that excessively late that they've terminated it at Hallamshire. The bus has spun around at the Hallamshire terminus point and parked up there until it's due to leave on time in its next trip, and it's gone out on time. Yes, it does cut out a fair bit of the route, but for a little bit of damage, you've in fact run the majority of the service anyway. So it does come in handy, especially when in situations like that, when you've got a bus behind you to transfer people onto, so you are running that catastrophically late that there is a bus anyway, so they've waited long enough. It makes more sense to do that, because then you've regulated the service in the opposite direction and you're only annoying people in one direction rather than in both.
68 to Aldwych.
And I think once announcements and things like that, like the iBus system becomes mandatory in 2026, it'll really, really help, because you'll be able to not just change the blind, but you'll also be able to sort of change the announcement system. So the announcement system, like it does on here, will say the destination of this route's changed. And again, it's all part of making the bus network as easy and as efficient to use for the customer perspective as possible. Like it is so difficult sometimes for the passengers to understand how buses work, especially if you've got all the different colour systems and with different liveries of the buses. You've got all the different variations of route numbers and routes and blind set differently and different fare systems. And I think it's as much as it's something that it veins me to say, because I do like the variations of liveries. I do think from a customer perspective, sometimes having everything painted in one colour, everything branded the same, would probably work a lot better than having all of these fancy different liveries. Purely because it just causes a lot more confusion for the customer perspective, because sometimes they're not sure what tickets to use on what services. I mean, all the travelling I've been doing this year, I've had it in times where I've been confused as to what tickets are valid on what operators in what areas, because you can do all the research and sometimes it's not actually that clear cut. Like, you'd think that it would be a lot easier to decide for somebody like myself who does that for a living. You'd kind of think it would be quite clear cut, quite easy to understand. And it isn't. It's not necessarily that easy to understand. So it's I do understand the concept of franchising, and on the contrary to what quite a lot of people are thinking, I am still a supporter of franchising in West Yorkshire. I'm not a supporter of franchising in South Yorkshire. I don't believe they need it at all, nor in East Yorkshire, nor in North Yorkshire. However, I do think that franchising is needed in West Yorkshire. And to be quite honest with you, if the cuts in South Yorkshire keep going the way that they are, it will probably be needed in South Yorkshire soon as well. But hopefully they won't get to that stage, all being well. But I do think it's needed in West Yorkshire. Purely because the services have been cut back to the bare bone, and they've not been cut back to the bare bone because of passenger levels, they've been cut back to the bare bone because of the operators. And I think a regulation is needed because the demand for the services are there. The operators at the moment just are in an insufficient position to provide them. Be it a correlation of a lack of funding, or drivers, a lack of drivers, lack of staffing, or lack of vehicles. There's a multitude of reasons, but the big operators at the moment in West Yorkshire aren't in the position to provide the services that are required. They used to be, but they're not anymore. And as a result, the West Yorkshire as a whole, with the bus services and the networks, is being strangled. It's been really, really cut back, and it's just not what it used to be at all, in any shape or form. And that's when you get to the point that you do need the regulating. You need either the current operators regulating to provide the services, or you need brand new operators to come in that can provide the services that are required. But you do not want to franchise area by area. That is still not what you want to do. I'm very, very confused at the moment as to where this obsession with area by area has come from. But an area by area approach is such a risky maneuver to undertake when it comes to franchising, and it also hinders private and independent operators versus your big companies, because the big areas are only going to be big companies. And as proven by the whole point of why franchising has been introduced, you do not want to leave it down to the big companies and to have to run it. You want a nice and healthy mix. I mean, you don't want a situation like London EasyLink happening on a big scale, that by running sort of franchising tranches by town, you heavily risk that issue. And in the nicest way, people will argue and say, "Oh well, but there was two separate awards." But the problem is the two separate awards is one for all of the main services and two for the second, very minuscule local services. And if the big operator goes under, or there's a big crash and the operator collapses, that isn't unheard of, and the operator goes under, you're then left in a situation where all the people are reliant on the small little operator that won't have the buses, they won't have the drivers, and even if they do, they won't have the drivers route learnt to run all the services, to pick up the pieces. And it, as a concept, it just will not work. You're basically going down the identical road of what you wanted to defeat, but giving them a little bit more money. And that's my opinion on the perspective. As I say, everybody may have their own on that, but that's my opinion. I probably need to do an Andamore Central explanation video of that. But that's the worrying road that we're going down, where it's hindering in the independent operators who know the areas a lot better and are currently filling in the gaps that the big operators can't fill. So all you're doing with franchising is giving it back to the big operators, giving them more regulation, and then you don't really have much of a choice. You can find them a million times, but if they're not going to provide the service, or they're not going to be able to provide it before franchising, it's incredibly unlikely that they'll be able to provide it after franchising. They'll just get a little bit more money, and they'll just have a more enhanced timetable to try and achieve that they're not going to do. So it's just a really odd one. Why they're going down this area by area system, when in actual fact, yes, you should franchise in area quadrants. However, after you've devolved into each area, you then have to do it route by route. You've got all of these local bus operators who know the areas so well. So well. They're very knowledgeable. They're a lot more knowledgeable than a brand new big company could be. They know the routes. They have the regular routes that they do with the regular drivers, regular customers, stuff like that. And if they benefit from a little bit more funding, they can provide a much better service on those specific corridors. And yes, they may go for one of the bigger services. But then again, if they go for bigger services, it doesn't work. Again, like London EasyLink, they can then give the service back. A big company can take it over and run it like they did previously, with a little bit more funding and an enhanced timetable like it used to be before all of the post-COVID cutbacks. So that's what I would argue is the best model. I mean, that's the whole reason that the London model works, because it works based on a route-by-route concept, not a town-by-town, city-by-city concept, because no matter how many tiers you break that down into, it's not going to work. I mean, it's running it route by route means that you can control it a lot better, you can mediate it a lot better. Every single route is an independent entity. And as a result of every single route being an independent... Oh, we're going this way. As a result of every single route being an independent entity, when the awards come up each time, each award can be assessed individually. So each route can be assessed individually, rather than looking at a whole and thinking, oh, well, generally they did okay, but they might have cancelled X, Y, and Z on these routes, but generally they did alright. Oh no, that's a stand. So you can assess it route by route, go, hang on, how actually did they do on this service? How were the customers? How customers, were they satisfied? Were they happy with the services? And then you can also look into, well, what vehicles were they using? What were allocated? And do we need to put in a new vehicle requirement as part of the award for the service? So if you get the service, you have to provide new vehicles, and that's what they do in London. Or an operator to win a contract can promise new vehicles, and they have to promise the new service, the new buses. They have to promise a potentially enhanced timetable, and all of these elements that provide the service, the high quality service that they get in London, because it is highly competitive. Once you give an entire town or an entire city their main services to an operator, the operator's not going to be that fussed, because they've got all the services. They're not having to compete for every single route from every single depot that they run. And then again, if the operator doesn't succeed on winning the entire an entire area on retender, what on earth do they do? Especially if the operator still owns the garage. The operator just has to shut down all of the staff and then made redundant. The new operator then has to find a load of buses. And if the two operators don't get along, they're not going to sell the buses across. It's just... It mind boggles me as to why they're going on a town-by-town, like, concept. It just does not make any sense whatsoever. I mean, don't get me wrong, from an enthusiast perspective, it's really cool to see an entire operator take over an area, but it's just so much.
What's your badge number? I'm gonna...
There's just so much more liability with it, so much more potential that could go wrong, and you just don't have that fallback like you do in a route-by-route franchising concept, where you just have so much more protection just in case stuff doesn't go to plan. That if it were for me, is just an absolute no-brainer. It really is a no-brainer to go route by route, because otherwise you just you're asking to go down the same problematic road that you've just been down, only that time you don't have the competitors to potentially rescue you if the operator goes on strike. I mean, it's like when operators in London go on strike, when, let's say, Go Ahead go on strike, for example, most of the corridor that we've just been down on the 68 has a load of other routes following it. And yes, it's not an ideal world where you're strained down to one main service, but it's like the 12th, for example, when you go down Oxford Circus on this game, obviously it's all might have all changed now, but you've got the Go Ahead 12 service, and then you've got the Abellio 159, and a lot of the routes shadow and follow, and if you have two different operators running the services, and multiple operators down the different corridors with their local depots that they bid for based on where the route is and based on reducing dead mileage and provided the best deal, you put yourself in the situation where you are actually going to get a good deal out of it. You're going to get security if an operator goes on strike, so the whole place isn't going to ground to a halt. You're going to get a security if the operator goes under because you've got other services to back up on, and you can quite easily just re-tender the odd service or two on an emergency contract. Yes, I'll probably have to draft a few extra buses in, but it won't be the be-all and end-all. And you can also specify your buses more. You can do more quality control per service, so your customers feel like they're being listened to, rather than on a large-scale concept where in Bolton, for example, the operators on the 36 and 37 and the 8 will have a louder voice than the 562, the 561 and 534 services. Yeah, those three services are probably going to be the ones that they'll pull buses off and drivers off to run the 37, the 36 and the 8. So having them all running the same thing and making one big ball, it just doesn't work, because if an operator can then say, oh, well, we can't run this service, what are Transport for Greater Manchester going to do? They're not going to be able to say, oh, we'll just retend it, because they've tendered an entire tranche together. They've put them in groups, so you can't. If you're going to say, oh, we'll just retender it, they're going to have to retender the entire thing. So it's not like an operator back in the day can say, oh, we can't run the service, we're having issues. And it's like in London, they'll hand it back to TfL, or then hand it back onto an emergency, or then give it to a permanent operator, who will then probably have terms to provide so much amount headway, and they'll have to provide certain vehicles within 5 years, and they'll get heavily regulated, and they'll get fined if not, and then it transfers across. In Manchester, if you don't run a service at the moment, it's just going to be, oh, okay, well, there's not much we can do. So it's just a bit strange. I just find it really strange, really, really weird how it's been done.
This bus terminates here. Please take all your belongings with you. This bus terminates here. Please take all your belongings with you.
It's weird to think that Aldwych on this section now is two-way traffic. It's very strange. Every time I go down to central London, it really takes me by surprise. Every time. And I've seen it on multiple occasions now. I mean, it's been like this for a couple of years. And it still takes me by surprise. Oh, I did okay. So there we go. So that was the 68 run. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you've enjoyed the discussion about franchising. If you have made it to this point, I'd love to hear about your opinions in the comment section. So whether you agree with the idea of route by route, or you agree with the idea of town by town, and you have some perspective or some thought that I haven't put into consideration before, then do let me know in the comments below. It is quite an active discussion at the moment, something I am putting an More Central video together on. So I do look forward to hearing your opinions on it. For now though, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then do be sure to click that like button so that more people can find it and enjoy like you have. And if you haven't already, do be sure to subscribe to the More Central YouTube channel, or the More Bus videos one is what we're doing. You can subscribe to the More Central one for upcoming videos on the real life franchising in Manchester, as well as the ones that are already released. And you can also subscribe to the More Bus videos YouTube channel for more content like this from the simulation section, with 2 videos a week, alongside an archive of around 6,000 backseating engine-focused public transport videos from the UK and beyond, with buses, trams, trains and more. There's something on there for everyone, with an additional 21 videos added per week. So there's enough content on here to keep you busy, alongside the 2 simulation videos as well. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this one, and I will see you all in the next video, mate. Goodbye for now. Bye.